Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to shine bright like a silver, well, a polished silver coin, because we have the one, the only silver guru himself, Mr. David Morgan, joining us today. He's the man, of course, behind the Morgan Report and the go-to guy for all things silver. So put your silver foil hat on today, grab your spoonful of colloidal silver, and let's get ready to shine like some precious and get some of that precious metals of knowledge today on the Alternative Angle channel. It's actually, you're the first person to have back on my channel for many, many years. David, I've decided to relaunch this and get, you know, only the best of the best on to talk about all things crypto and precious metals, as I think we're really running into a special time. So welcome on the show.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's one of those times, and I guess you feel it too. You know, it's an interesting time to be alive. We have all of this AI stuff that's up and coming, which is really happening fast. We have the currency collapse sort of happening, right? Everything that we've talked about, the massive inflation that silver and gold bugs have talked about for years, happening, and it seems kind of surreal because it's all becoming a perfect storm, and people just seem to be totally oblivious in the mainstream.
I agree. It's I don't know if it's normal, but history shows that it's what takes place. I mean, most of the people get caught or they're blindsided by an economic collapse or readjustment, reallocation, whatever you want to call it. Most people, and me included, have what's called normalcy bias. We believe that tomorrow will be just like today or very similar. And these tail end events that happen at the very unlikely do occur. And when they do occur, then most people are not prepared, either, you know, mentally, spiritually, financially, or physically. And that's the way life is. There can be some very abrupt changes at times. So I'm with you, Josh. I think you're correct that you know, most people are going to whistle by the graveyard, as the expression goes, and not realize that times are, you know, interesting times are nigh. They're here now, and they're going to get more interesting.
Whistle past the graveyard. I like it. Yeah, it's really true, and it's a great visual, because that's definitely how it feels. And when you turn on the television, like right now, the WEF is happening in Davos, and you see all these demos. And I don't have a television, but I was at a friend's house and we turned it on for a second. And the main thing on the news was all these demonstrators, and the only thing they showed was like, tax the rich, tax the rich. and I'm thinking, man, it's so set up. All of it is just so fake, you know. we have basically that's the whole point, is to tax the heck out of everybody. When they say tax the rich, it means tax everybody. You know, it's not really tax the rich, because it's such a undefined term.
Sure.
And so, you know, yeah, it just sort of reminded me of that, as whistling past the graveyard. Everyone sort of not really understanding the truth, because it's something people can resonate with. Yeah, tax the rich, you know, it makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, you know, but if you just scratch the little bit below the surface, you realize that there's a lot more of going on, and that collapse, that graveyard, is heading towards us. But let's get just directly into the questions that I had written. Now, I'd written here, if you were stranded on a desert island, but as I feel like the system is kind of on its way down. What about if you were stranded on a whole country? The country's collapsed. The currency is in turmoil. In Germany, they relaunched the new Deutschmark back in the day. It's happened all the time where governments just relaunch a currency. But if you had to have one form of currency, David, would you choose gold, silver, or Bitcoin? And why would you? Which one of those and why?
Well, I would choose silver, and not because, well, I'll just explain why. First of all, Bitcoin. So I look at the worst case scenario. So the worst case scenario is no access to electrical power. In that case, Bitcoin wouldn't be very useful. Although, if you had your phone charged and someone had a wallet on their phone, you could transact. But that's one more issue that you might have to overcome. Gold would be fine, except that its unit value is so high that it wouldn't be that useful, because 1 ounce of gold in today's units of measure is like $1,800 US. That's a pretty hefty amount.
Yeah.
And if you just want to, trade your neighbor for some groceries or some food, or, that's too high a unit price. So silver is the one that could be used in that kind of a scenario the most easily, most recognizable, and it's kind of been its history. So that's what I would choose.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like a lot of people talk about this scenario in particular, but there's always a degree of what infrastructure is left in some sort of cataclysmic event. And in one way, whiskey is kind of the best currency.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
you gave me three choices. I mean, if there are others there, it might be cigarettes, it could be booze, could be coffee. It just depends, and where you are, what the culture is. I mean, if you're in a
yeah,
culture that doesn't drink coffee, then coffee won't be a big barter item. But if you're in the U.S. and everybody's used to getting their Starbucks addiction fulfilled and it's closed down, if
yeah,
you own a bunch of coffee, you're in a pretty good spot.
right, right, yeah. And the Bitcoin argument is really, really interesting. It's extremely interesting because this is one of the main pushbacks that I've had, is that if there was an electricity problem, of course, you wouldn't be able to reach servers. You could build some sort of mesh network, and there are mesh networks that are available to people using Bluetooth where you do multiple hops. But that does mean that you need enough people to build that network. And you also need to reach some sort of consensus node that has the latest blocks. And so, yeah, it's not the best. Saying that, the internet was built for a nuclear holocaust where one section of it would be destroyed and the network would build around
Right.
any damage. But we've seen in the past, the past 2 years, actually, with this whole, well, I like to call it a scamdemic because of how it went down. But um, it really showed that the internet can be extremely controlled in terms of its narrative. And the idea of mainstream media and that, mainstream media is dead. No, it's not. The connections that Google has, the channels that people watch, the Twitter, the YouTube, and everything. And now with Elon Musk buying out Twitter and actually exposing the in-depth connections between the FBI and government narrative, and probably in step with big pharma as well, is the ability for narrative control. And so that's kind of as dangerous as a nuclear blast, because you're effectively taking out information, which is the same thing as destroying kind of a section of the internet, a section of because it's non-accessible. And so some would say, like, I was absolutely blown away at the amount of control on the narrative that they which is a whole bunch of interest groups, had over information flow during the last 2 years. It's phenomenal.
It is. And, the old, I don't say it's an adage, but, the idea that I think the Nazis had, that if you tell a lie often enough, it'll be believed. I think there's merit in that. And me, I'm old enough to, and almost sounds ridiculous, but it still applies to some people. Well, I saw it on television. Well, if you
Yeah.
saw it on television, you saw it on television. That's all the fact is. But their idea is if you saw it on television, it must be true. It must be factual. It's got to be the real thing. And of course, that's anything but the true case. But yet, people still, people close to me believe some of these, what I call less than favorable news, just because it's on, that big black box and it's a big screen and there's somebody that's handsome or pretty saying it to you. It's real. Are you kidding me? This whole thing is a mock reality, but
Yeah.
some people don't even see it. Many do, more and more all the time. That's why alt stations like yours and mine get traction, because people, know, their inner knower, that this is all BS. What's the truth here? Who's got an alternative view? Might not agree with it. That's what critical thinking is all about. I'm off on a tangent. I'll finish it, but the best thing you can teach anyone in school is how to think. That's
Yeah.
number one. But we're not. We're taught to believe.
We're taught to believe and repeat. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there's multiple layers on mainstream media. The original layer was, just there's a broadcast coming into your home, and then as you get familiar with the face that's on television every night, they become a friend. That's why people mourn when a celebrity dies, because they
Right.
feel like they know these people. They feel like, oh, but I love this news anchor. He's so genuine and lovely, and he wouldn't lie to me. They wouldn't lie, and they have a laugh in the morning on the morning show, and it keeps me warm and fuzzy. And then on top of that, you've got your friends also saying, no, that's it. That I watch that guy too. He's great, isn't he? So you start to have this almost like shared connection between these people that wouldn't have a clue who you are.
Right.
And the internet, though, is really, really fascinating in that originally the idea I always thought was, wow, now we don't need the mainstream media doesn't exist now. Now we have all the sum of all knowledge, misinformation, information, all of it, and it's up to your deduction and looking for sources that will find some sort of a truth or get closer to a truth. And really what I saw in the last 2 years is really that destruction of the ability to find that, because of what still from the top down determining what truth is and where that and what narrative you see on YouTube. And actually, I started seeing this most poignantly during the Trump era, because no matter what you think of Trump, no one can be absolutely terrible all the time.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and really, when I looked on news.google.com, which I thought was a really great idea originally, because it would aggregate during just to step back a bit, during the second Gulf War, using Google News was fantastic. I was reading newspapers from Baghdad because it was just a plain aggregator of RSS, and I could actually gain access to different sides of the story. But then during the Trump era, you type in Trump, it was just negative, 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 negative. I could not find one single positive story about what that guy is doing. I thought, man, they've really got it stitched up now into what people think.
I agree. I don't have much to add other than I believe that in the beginning it was kind of an open source, almost a free for all, and you were up to your own critical thinking, judgment, bias, or whatever to determine what was real. I remember, I first got a pretty high speed access, and I actually happened to live pretty close to Silicon Valley at that time in my life. And for I guess a week or so, I'd be up till 2 in the morning because I love life. I'm curious about many topics, and I'd be on there typing in whatever in the search engine, something metaphysical, something physics related, something wondering
Yeah.
if this cure actually works. I mean, on and on. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I think it started that way. And then, of course, it's been more and more controlled for a very long time. And now, since I'm on the topic, unfortunately, it looks like this real ID thing that these power mongers want is going to require you to conform to some systematic way of proving you are who you are before you can even get internet access. So really? So
Yeah, and it's quite interesting at the talking heads that are even pushing this. People that I respect, like Jordan Peterson, are even pushing for non-anonymization or de-anonymization of internet access. And I think it's a grave mistake. And I can understand where he's coming from, because he gets trolled like there's no tomorrow.
yeah.
And he takes it very personally. He wears his heart on his sleeve. But it's a grave mistake, and it will happen. I agree with you, David. I feel it's pretty much inevitable, purely because people are so meh about things. They're just like, oh, I need to do this now. Okay, it's really sad. But I hope not. I mean, maybe there's a bit of shine on that silver coin, because I sometimes get surprised at life where I truly believe something about society, and it doesn't turn out the same. And this is the beautiful thing about teenagers rebelling. The whole, when you become a teenager, you rebel, and I think it's such an important part of society, because all of this like trans stuff and all these obsession with boys and me. I just know that the next generation will just reject all of that and rebel against that, and that's like there, So it's always things always changes. So let's see, but I want to get back onto silver, because I think you've been in the silver game so long, and you know everything, really,
not everything,
almost about that industry and about silver itself. And one of the things I wanted to ask was, what was the most bizarre use of silver that you've come across in your career?
I was at the Northwest Territorial Mint. It turned out to be what I suspected for a long time, a business that was destined for failure. He was basically taking money and not delivering the silver. That aside, so I'm at Ross Hanson's mint, and he said, and he was interesting person, and he was really kind of anti-silver, which is interesting for a guy running the mint. I mean, he should be neutral.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, he's making fun of the silver nuts, and he said, I got one for you. Have you heard of this one? And I hadn't. The most bizarre is, and it's hearsay. I don't actually believe it's true, but he said one of his clients was buying silver 100-ounce bars and building a mini room, a shelter, if you will, 100% silver, to protect himself from nuclear fallout. That's the most bizarre I've ever had.
Would that even work?
I don't think so. I never looked it up. I doubt it.
I doubt it, right? I mean, you need a window, or you need some sort of airflow. So it's all about this. I don't know, but yeah, interesting. I mean, it always fascinates me when I see some prepper. How far people go in the prepper scene. It's amazing, and I really, actually, coming from an old Boy Scout mentality of always be prepared. It's always it is a good idea. I mean, I've got friends that have barrels, and they buy these old whiskey barrels,
right,
and they fill them with food and seal them up, and have them in their cellar. And I don't think there's that much. Actually, I can't fault them, really, because you don't know what's happening. The thing is with the preppers is that I see is they have a single idea, like there's going to be floods, and they prep for that, or there's going to be nuclear fallout, and they prep for that, or I don't know, some global warming nuts might think that we're going to all boil. So it's usually a choose your poison sort of scenarios, and dealing with it. But yeah, it's a fascinating mentality, and I think it strikes most of us in the Bitcoin and crypto, as well as the gold and silver space, to be a little bit prepared. I know that the main players that I know in the industries, of both industries, are definitely got that prepper streak.
I agree.
Do you do much prepping, Dave?
Yeah, I would consider myself a moderate prepper. I've got stored food. I moved here with the idea in mind of being on a septic tank and a well, which I have, and then got a freezer, and I've got some solar backup. So, I'm moderate. Maybe some consider it hardcore prepper. I wouldn't consider myself hardcore, but I do have things set up. In the worst case scenario, I should be good for probably 2 or 3 months, really. So I've got my own water supply. I've got sanitation taken care of. I've got, freeze dried foods. It's not the tastiest, but hey, if you can't go to the grocery store, it works out pretty well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, it was interesting when COVID was when we first started seeing images of Chinese people just collapsing in the streets. I was straight up. I just went and grabbed like big bags of rice and all this stuff because everyone was laughing at me. But what really annoyed me was my family were laughing at me, and I was like, oh, now I need to buy for you guys as well because you're not going to be ready. So
extra food is a no lose bet. I mean, there's nothing about it that's wrong. I mean, the worst case is life goes on as always and nothing happens. You still can eat it. I mean, there's no doubt. Or if you don't like it, you give it to the food bank. I mean, I bought some stuff that wasn't preferable to my current, gut chemistry.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to throw it away. I gave it to the food bank. They were happy to receive it. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And things like rice and some of these staples, oil and stuff like that. It's also a really good idea to learn to ferment foods again. I think, I mean, talking of gut, it might,
right. Sure.
It can be hard, but yeah, it's it was really annoying that no one believed me at the time. And look, we saw the nutcase mentality that what I mean, it was really the start of the societal schizophrenia, or not even that, just yeah, I mean, what did they ended up coining it? It's just sort of the whole of society going crazy was really the toilet paper situation in the beginning. It was the weirdest thing. What did you think of that?
Oh, it's just a metaphor. I mean, it actually happened, but it just shows you how the herd mentality of the human species is. I mean, there's a book called Popular Delusions and Madness of Crowds by Mackey, maybe is how it's pronounced. And it just goes through history on these, the tulip bulb mania and kind of insanity that the herd mentality can do. Someone that might think something individually within a group might go to group think. In fact, it's been proven that it often happens that way. So something you wouldn't do on your own necessarily. We're in a crowd of 20 people and they're all acting in a certain way. You'll just join the behavior. So that's my thoughts.
Hey, what's the most common misconception that you've heard about silver and precious metals, I guess, in general? Because I tend to hear a lot, and I'm constantly debunking stuff that that I hear. What's the main one that you hear and you like to debunk?
Well, there's several that I could cite, but you gave me the questions ahead of time, so I put some thought into them. I'd say the number one misconception about silver is it's not money. I mean, I've heard even in my own peer group. In fact, I was at a conference years ago, and one of the better known speakers was speaking on gold, and then he touched on silver and says, "Yes, silver is just a commodity. It's an industrial commodity, and it's not money." And some of my fans came over in a big, fit of rage, and I'm like, I'm not going to take him on, and he's entitled to his opinion, but he's just plain wrong.
Yeah.
But there's two. It's a not a very complicated answer. Silver is money legally, so it's a lawful thing. So if I take a silver dollar into the market, the market is absolutely required to take it. Now, it has to be a silver coin. So it has to be, in the US, it would have to be like a silver eagle, or it could be a 90% silver coin, like an old, 1964 quarter, dime, half dollar, or 1922 Morgan dollar. Any of those silver coins must be accepted by any merchant anywhere in the US. Now, that's the law. So it's money at law. Now, is it economically money? That's a different question. Why would I take a US silver dollar that's worth about $25 fiat, $30 fiat, and spend it at face value of $1? Well, I wouldn't. It'd be stupid. I'd be giving the vendor 25 or 30 times the price of what I was picking up. So there's two sides of this story, but I think that's the one you can debunk the easiest if people hear the argument all the way through. I mean, you can't argue the law. But again, why would you walk into a department store and plunk down 20 ounces of silver and get the face value of 20 when you're looking at something of about $500 in current currency? So that's the one I think's the one I thought about the most, and it's the hardest. It's the easiest to prove, but people have to have it in the right context, because they think, well, it's not lawful money because there is a difference between what we consider legal tender and lawful money. So anyway,
right. Yeah, I mean, when I've the main one I get is, well, the spread's just too big to be really money, because everyone just takes these huge chunks. But I believe that's because of the way that silver's treated right now, and gold. It's not being used as currency. While it is, I do believe it is being used by money, but because money is meant to be saved.
yeah,
But in that sense, it is money. It's just not being used as currency. The mixture of crypto and silver, I think, can help that become a currency where you can define a gram of silver with a token, and be able to spend that and move that around. And I think that's definitely where it's heading, where the market's heading. Yeah, but yeah, fantastic. One of the things that I find really strange is and it happened with Bitcoin too. When I tried to talk to people about, hey, you should check out Bitcoin as anything to do with money, people are very, very intense about not wanting to change from their knowledge of what money is, and which is currently fiat. It's a really weird kickback that you get from people. I've gone to shops and they've almost been angry at me for asking, "Hey, do you take Bitcoin?"
yeah, people.
Yeah. So, and what do you think is more valuable to society then? I mean, you sort of touched on it before, saying that gold is is too expensive. But between gold and silver, what do you think is more valuable to society?
Well, that's an open and shut case. It's not opinion, it's fact. I mean, you cannot have a high-tech society without silver. It's impossible. You couldn't have a flat screen TV. You couldn't have a computer keyboard, a microwave oven keyboard. You couldn't have electricity. You couldn't have any of the devices that we have in the wireless sphere, like our cell phones. None of that is available without silver. Gold serves very few uses outside of an excellent use as money. But silver is more important. Otherwise, you couldn't have our living standard that we have now. So I've actually talked about this in the past, Josh, where we've seen a thought experiment where the oil price of oil is so expensive that we really curtail how much we use. So we reprioritize what the remaining oil is used for. Farming, some transportation. You can have a great farm if you can't get it to the market. What good is it? So in that reprioritization, you would probably go and continue to mine silver, but you quit mining gold. Because again, gold isn't that useful to society, whereas silver is imperative. You don't have it, you don't have a society. So that's my answer.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? Because maybe you would stop mining gold, which would shrink the supply, meaning gold would go up in price enough for people to then go, let's mine some gold because,
yeah, right.
It's got. But yeah, that's a really interesting take. I never thought of it like that. And yeah, it's the other thing I really love about silver is the antibacterial side of things,
Right.
and I'm already hearing of hospitals using silver-based paints for their walls to get some of these superbugs that are antibiotic resistant, which is also
a lot of the instruments are silver based, not all. And then of course, silver nitrite used in kids, babies' eyes when they're born. And there's a lot of the burn victim things are all silver based bandages. I mean, there's a lot of medical uses for silver.
Yeah.
And they all revolve around the antibacterial properties that you outlined. It'd be interesting to put a list together of everything that's in the medical field that's used, either a liquid or silver paste or whatever in the medical profession. It'd be a long list.
Hey, that sounds like a good blog post.
Yeah, right.
What's your staying on the silver vibe? There's it's interesting that the silver, gold, Bitcoin crew, they are very, very good at pattern recognition, and where pattern recognition stands is usually a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
And, what's your favorite conspiracy theory that's based around gold and silver?
There's only one on, there's several, but the one that really comes to mind is the conspiracy theory that there's more gold than silver on the planet. And that one, first of all, is it possible? The answer is yes. But we have, mining records from pretty much the 1300s. So we know how much has come out of the ground. And it's always roughly a 10-to-1 ratio. Right now it's 7-to-1. But the way it's been dispersed is not evenly, of course, but on aggregate, on the whole, there's 10 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold that's been put in the earth, one way or another. So the facts are, I've been around the world looking at different mines. I've been to Mongolia, for crying out loud, to look at a mine, right?
Nice.
And everywhere I go, the evidence is clear that it's about a 10-to-1 ratio, round numbers. So the idea that there's 3 times as much gold as there is silver, or whatever, especially coming out from one location, or perhaps one location, I don't want to read the conspiracy incorrectly, is highly doubtful. Some of these people have never been to a mine in their life. They don't know, a porphyry from a volcanic massive sulfide. They don't know anything about mining, yet they happen to know that there's more gold than silver. How?
Yeah.
How do they know that? Because of a newspaper article? Yeah, it's doubtful. So that would be the number one, I'd say. And I have to be fair. Do I absolutely know? No, but all the evidence points to the fact that that's not true. That gold is more rare or rarer than silver is. In fact, I put up a couple of videos on my Twitter feed from I think it's a deep dive history channel or something. It's kind of a unique channel. And they did a series of about 3 segments rather on silver. and they talked about how gold is formed in space and why gold is rarer than silver. Now, that's a theory as well. I mean, I don't think anyone knows absolutely that stars are the only way that you can get gold or silver distributed on Earth, but it could be true. Anyway, I digress. But that was it. I think that's one that some people buy into it. There's a lot that have debunked it, or let me restate that because I don't think it can be totally debunked. But again, there's so much evidence to say, to say otherwise, that logic would dictate that gold is more rare than silver.
Yeah, interesting. One of the biggest ones for me that it's not really a conspiracy, but it's this trope, it's this thing that everyone sort of takes and repeats as truth, which is, oh, there's just so much gold on asteroids and we're just going to go and mine it. And
Yeah.
it just keeps on coming up and you're like, what? And for me, the answer is always, have you ever felt a bar of gold? Like, do you know how heavy it is? And if you were to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere with so much weight, it's going to be difficult. But that's what do you think of that? That constant.
I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's the same argument that there's gold in seawater. Well, there is. There's probably 1 billion ounces in seawater, but it's uneconomic to retrieve it. The whole thing about mining is it economic or not? I mean, let's say that instead of the moon being made of green cheese, it's made of silver. All right. It's 100% silver. Is it economic to go up there with the spaceship, put it on there and bring it back home? No, not with the present technology. So this is where you get what's called cutoff grade in a mine. You know, how rich of a mine do you have to have at this location with all costs included? Power, transportation, how deep is it? How much do you have to dig? All that's a consideration for whether it's economic. So yeah, there could be all kinds of pure gold asteroids flying around, but how much is the cost to go get it? I'm going to continue just a minute. It's sort of like the way we really need to think about the energy market. People think of how much it costs for a barrel of oil, but they're missing the point. What you need to know is how much energy is required to extract a barrel of oil, because money can be printed, oil cannot. So you need to know what is the return of energy on the energy invested. And unless it's somewhere around the 10-to-1 ratio or higher, you are making a mistake to actually even go for that kind of a return. So same thing applies to the mining business. Unless it is economically, like the other question, viable, it makes absolutely no sense, no matter how many damn asteroids are out
there. Yeah. It's and I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. The economics don't make sense. If in one way you could say, well, we've mined it and we're just going to store it in space, but what? Why? Why? Why not just keep it on the asteroid then and say that, hey, we're going to, I don't know, you should tokenize that or something. It just makes it's very, very interesting. One of the main one that I really like, people just really don't know how heavy gold is. It's quite amazing.
Sure.
The shock on people's face when they go to like a gold dealer like Perth Mint or somewhere, and they, there's usually a bar that's in a box that you can grab and sort of, feel the weight of, and seeing one of those 15-ounce bars, 15 kilo bars, really, I know it's 15 kilos, but it just looks like it shouldn't weigh that much. And when they do, and so a lot of people have asked with Voltoro, for instance, we secure people's gold in Switzerland, and say, well, what if someone comes and steals it? It's extraordinary. Just the logistics are hard, because even truck tires would pop under the weight of not that much gold. Really, it's just so heavy, the stuff, that you need special equipment, and you need to carry it out in smaller amounts. And so yeah, re-entry from space would definitely be an issue that I see. But yeah, there's so many great conspiracies. If you have one out there, folks, that you love and you want to debunk, please let us know in the comments. I love a good debunking. But one of the last questions I want to ask you, Dave, before I let you go, I sometimes think about who I'd like to have met, some sort of historical figure. My one would have definitely been Tesla, Nikola Tesla. I would have really loved to have talked to him. If there was a historical figure that had an impact on the silver market, or just any historical figure, who would it be and why?
That's a tough one. I've thought about it, not deeply. There's probably 3 or 4. But the 2 that come to mind is Jerome Smith, who was the biggest advocate of silver back in the 70s. He wrote a booklet. I have one. They're hard to find. It's called Silver Prophets in the 70s. And then he became better known, and then he wrote a book called Silver Prophets in the 80s. And what's behind the boom in silver. And he was the silver expert of the day. But I wouldn't choose him. I feel that I've read probably everything he's ever written. But I would go to William Jennings Bryan. And as the Democratic politician running for president of the United States that lost, I would want to know how much he really knew about silver, if it was just a political platform that he was given to run on, and if he understood the importance of what the Eastern bankers were doing to take us off a bimetallic standard onto a monometallic standard. The Wizard of Oz is a metaphor that the whole book is about going off the silver standard and onto the gold standard. That's what the Wizard of Oz is about.
Really? Is that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, for your listeners, there's a book called, I think it's called The Secret. It's not a book. I'm sorry. It's a DVD. I think it's called The Secret of Oz. Excuse me, folks, while I look at the other screen. So I want to get the right name here so you can watch it because it's free. Yeah, The Secret of Oz. The symbols of the monetary reform movement are embedded in the most beloved children's story of The Wizard of Oz. It's done by Bill Still, Still. I've watched it several times, and it makes an unrefutable case that the whole book was about the common people using silver in the West, or nationwide, really, but the Eastern bankers. And there's another add-on to that I don't say too often, Josh, and there's another scholar that wrote a series of papers. There's only 3 of them, but it's gold standard equals fiat in disguise. And his whole premise is that once you go on a monometallic standard, then you'll go on to a fiat only standard.
I agree.
And that's pretty much what happened. So the best, and this is proven in history, although most, people can argue with me or not, I don't care. But the proof's in the pudding, and the proof is that a bimetallic or trimetallic standard has a far superior way of keeping money honest for the populace than just going to a gold only standard.
Wow. Yeah. It's really interesting that you say that it's equivalent to a fiat standard, because really a gold standard is just price fixing gold.
Right. And you just get a receipt for it. And unless they match 1-to-1, then you're cheating. And that's what happened with the Bretton Woods Agreement. Started off honestly, and there probably was enough backing of gold for the dollar, but eventually that was abused. And of course, France caught on to it, as others, and said, well, if the contract's 35 per dollar, here's the dollars, give me the gold. And of course, the gold started being drained off at a real rapid rate. It was being drained anyway, but at a rather subtle, noticeable, but unless you were a banker, didn't really know, rate. And then it accelerated, and Nixon was basically forced to close the gold window. I mean, we were wrong. The U.S. was wrong to renege on a contract, but it's done all the time. That's the problem with the gold standard is there's a human element. That's why something like blockchain that Bitcoin was the precursor to, they, proved what the blockchain's power is, has it where purportedly it's an immutable ledger. I mean, once it's on there, it's on there. It's there for everyone. So it's pretty hard to cheat if you have a ledger that's transparent to everyone and cannot be changed. Can it be in reality? I don't know. I mean, I've heard arguments. I want to go down that road if you don't mind. But what I want to state is the main problem with the gold standard is accountability. Whereas with the blockchain base, it'd be pretty hard, or at least in theory, it'd be hard to muff it, to mess with it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, with any database, it's the old shit in, shit out concept, right? You just put nonsense in and it'll repeat nonsense, immutable nonsense. But so the thing with Bitcoin itself, because it's native to the blockchain, no one's entering that. It's part of the protocol that one Bitcoin is now minted. Whereas if you had to say, here's some gold and I'm going to put it in there, you do need to have systems in place to minimize the trust needed to verify the truth of that. And there's many people working on that. I don't think it's impossible. Gold and silver have been around long enough that they've had 5,000 years, if not more, of scams. So everyone, right. So we've gotten used to what scams are out there, how people perpetrate them, and how to make sure we filter for those. Whereas Bitcoin, we're still discovering, and scammers are discovering how to use it to scam people. So yeah, I do think it's possible, but it's definitely tricky. It's not something easy. One of the people I'd like to talk to back onto that question is the Hunt brothers, William and Nelson. They for the listeners that don't know, that they tried to corner the silver market in the late 70s, and I think they ended up amassing something like 200 million ounces or something, like a huge amount of silver. I'd love to just let the audience just a little bit of background on that, David. I'm sure you've got some insight of what happened there, and do you think that's also possible in the Bitcoin space?
I think almost anything is possible. Yes, it could happen in the Bitcoin space. There's a book behind me, and I've read it twice. My memory's not failing me, but I don't remember a lot of it. But it's God, I can't remember the name of the book, but it's Bull Run or something like that. It's Paul Sarnoff wrote basically what happened during the Hunt debacle. There's a couple things that really are interesting. Number one, before I go further, one of my premium members years ago said that the trustee for the Hunt fortune, I know him, and he's coming to a mining conference and he wants to meet you. And I'm thinking, really? Because you hear stuff, these, could be trolled, who knows? But I took it at face value. Sure enough, I met him. And so he was right there. And one thing he emphasized to me was that the CFTC did change the rules. I've had people from the CFTC tell me in a meeting where everyone heard the same words that they didn't change anything. But according to the trustee for the Hunts, they did. I agree with him. The point being is that he had a couple options that he could have won. You want to call it winning and losing. At one point, he did a lot in the futures market, but he also did a lot in the physical market. So in that book outlines where on one of the delivery months, there wasn't enough silver bullion to satisfy his delivery. So the exchange called him, or somebody from the exchange called him and asked, can we give you bag silver instead of bar silver as silver to make the delivery, meet the contract? And he said yes. Back in those days, and very few people know this unless you're my age in a silver net, and there aren't a lot of us. There were two markets in the commodities futures markets. There was a coin bag market, which were literally bags of silver that were 1964 or older, silver, 90% silver coins with 1,000 face value. It could be a bag of dimes, a bag of quarters, a bag of 50-cent pieces. And those bags traded. They were so plentiful.
Wow.
And additional to that, there was the bullion market, which was silver bars, 1,000 ounce denominations. And there was some arbitrage that went between the two because a melted bag is 720 ounces of fine silver. So you could do the math, and with the computer, even some people in their heads could do the math that, we could go long bags and short bullion and make, arbit.
Interesting.
The bag market went away because a lot of the bags got melted down into bullion, and it was taken off the exchange a long, long time ago. But that was one instance where Bunker Hunt actually had the upper hand over the exchange. All they could say is, well, you're breaching the contract. I've got a contract to deliver this much bullion. You can't do it. Force majeure. You guys are out of the game.
Yeah.
That didn't happen, but it could have.
Fascinating. Well, David, you have one of the best, in my opinion, newsletters about the subject on silver. Now, a lot of the people that follow me are obviously in crypto, and a lot of them think, gold, silver is why I don't get it. And I think if you don't get it, you should get it. You should understand it. And just like I was telling people in 2011 on this YouTube channel to look into Bitcoin and that Bitcoin's not a scam, I'm telling you that diversification into rare assets, and this is where people like David and myself, we steer away from the dogma like Peter Schiff has, where he's just just constantly calls Bitcoin a scam, but doesn't see the upside potential or the ride that's ahead. That sort of refuses to. Both of us, I don't want to put words in your mouth, David, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're open-minded to see that, okay, we have these things called rare numbers, which are cryptocurrencies, and we have rare metals, and we see value in both. And I think it's really important that the audience learn, because just like Peter Schiff refuses to learn and embrace Bitcoin, I think a lot of Bitcoiners refuse to want to embrace gold and silver. But I think there is a need for it. There will continue to be a need for it. Just like people, I still like going to the cinema, even though I've got a nice 4K TV at home. I still enjoy it. There's different reasons for going to the cinema, but it plays an important. I mean, that's a bit of a weird analogy, but there's an important reason for gold and silver, and I would urge my listeners to go and see the Morgan Report and join up with your newsletter. I think it's very, very important voice in the space.
Well, thank you for that. Of course, we cover more than silver. It is one of my passions, but it's more than just a hard money newsletter. It's more than gold and silver. We look at the complete resource sector. I've been writing more and more on energy over the last few years. The last issue, we did a feature on AI, and we followed the blockchain from pretty much the inception. I'm not a real big fan of Bitcoin, but I'm a pretty big fan of the blockchain. There's issues around Bitcoin that are perceived more than reality. But one of those is the big green movement. It takes energy to mine a Bitcoin. And as the energy cliff that we're on starts to become more apparent, there'll be political motivations to talk about the cost of mining Bitcoin. So,
yeah.
Excuse me. So that's one thing. But the blockchain's here to stay. And your last question is, what is your opinion on the role of centralized institutions such as governments and banks in the future of cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
It's pretty self-evident at this point that the main banking elite want to have a central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
So it's not a cryptocurrency. It's different because it's centralized, not decentralized. And I think they're going to get it. And I think that they're going to mandate that you can only do certain transactions with a government approved blockchain unit, whereas something like a Bitcoin or Ethereum or load or whatever the coin be, that's fine for peer-to-peer transactions, but cannot be used for a government service or to buy a car loan, a utility bill, any state service, maybe even the whole medical industry. You couldn't buy any pharmaceuticals with the Bitcoin. It have to be a central bank digital currency approved by the authorities. So I think that's where they're headed. If we get there or not remains to be determined, but I think that's the big plan.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's the leverage they have upon us, especially as we head more and more into socialized aspects of society, where they start to socialize everything. As I do feel that AI will take a lot of resources away from earning capacity of a lot of people, especially robotics and AI mixed. So as that happens, there's more and more call for the most simplistic of answers, which is the government should fix it by paying everybody. And so the socialized aspects, once things are socialized, like the whole medical industry, then, well, if you want to be part of this, then you need to pay with digital, because you will get that as some sort of income, and that's the only thing it will spend. So yeah, I'm definitely with you there. Folks, absolutely go and check out, where do people follow you, David? What's the best place?
Yeah, there's several places. The easiest is just our main landing page, themorganreport.com. Pretty active on Twitter at SilverGuru22. I've got a YouTube channel, The Morgan Report. I am on LinkedIn. I think there's something on Facebook, but we don't really do much there. And I just started an Instagram channel. It's Real Silver Guru. If you want to check that out, just experimenting with it. But I'm trying to do those pithy short clips that in 2 minutes you might get an education, right?
Yeah.
If you say the right thing in the right way, it can resonate with people. So
yeah, and
that's brand new.
And that's the most important thing right now is educating yourself, folks, on these matters, because we're heading into you don't want to be whistling past the graves, like David said. So so make sure you join up those, and thank you so much for your time. It's a true honor to have you on my channel, and yeah, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the Morgan Report.
Well, very good. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, there we go.